Get ready. New Orleans Saints wide receiver Chris Olave's bounce back game is here. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to all you everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget you can subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss the latest episodes. And if you want to keep the conversation going, take part in our exclusive film studies, Q&As, breaking news access, and much more, you can become a Locked On Saints insider today by heading over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSaints today to join a community I would love for you to be a part of. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on your favorite social media, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media, Saints News Network, Tuesdays in the Locked On NFL podcast, and here with you every single Monday through Friday, and then some on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks, the easiest and most fun way to play daily fantasy sports. Head over to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL today and use promo code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Today's episode, the game plan. We're going to be taking a look at how the New Orleans Saints can beat the Chicago Bears and should beat the Chicago Bears this weekend, including why this weekend must be a masterclass by Dennis Allen over on the defensive side, why the Bears defense presents the exact challenge that the New Orleans Saints need while still being beatable. And to get us all started here, Chris Olave is going to go for triple digits and 2 touchdowns in this game. It will be Chris Olave's first multi-touchdown game of his career. Believe it or not, that's not happened yet his rookie season or so far this year. Chris Olave is in need of a bounce back game. He said it to New Orleans media when he was talking about the recent struggles that he's had, sort of what has kind of kept things kind of where they are for him here recently, all of that. And he mentioned that he needs just one good game to get back into rhythm. And I believe that this game against the Chicago Bears presents the best opportunity for him to have the most immediate bounce back game that he absolutely needs. Let's not sugarcoat this, right? I think there's often times where we, and I say we collectively, will jump into the criticism side of all of it because that's the easier game than actually taking the time to dig deep and look at how things can improve. And that's what we've always tried to do here on the show. Even when we are being critical, we always also then take the next step of, now that we've established what to be critical of, here's how to fix the things that we are critical of. And that's what we're going to do here today when it comes to Chris Olave. So here are the 2 reasons that I think that Chris Olave is going to have a big game against the Chicago Bears. First of all, the want, right? The mentality's there, all of that. I think a lot of people want to start trying to throw the diva tag on him, want to start calling him Brandon Cooks 2.0, all of these other things. But the one thing to remember is that when it comes to that quote unquote diva tag or whatever it is that people try to put on wide receivers, that's stereotypically a wide receiver thing that gets thrown at them, is that usually if there is somebody that's actually kind of being that ego heavy person or ego forward person, that oftentimes that comes with a lot of denial. That's not Chris Olave. Chris Olave has done nothing but own up to the shortcomings of his game so far this year, which have hardly been shortcomings, by the way, because through his 8 games here with the New Orleans Saints this year, he's not far off from where he was through his first 8 games last year as a rookie. So there's not been much of a fall off. It's just that what I think people are responding to is that we all expected a big boost, a big step forward for Chris Olave. Have not seen that just yet, but I think that begins to curve this week. Here's the second reason why from the game perspective. Let me read out some numbers for you, but here's the overall story. The Chicago Bears defense, particularly their cornerbacks, struggle where Chris Olave plays his best game against zone coverage. The Chicago Bears in man coverage, which they play only about 20% of the time, 20 to 25%, depending upon which corner you're looking at. Some corners go out more heavily to play in those red zone situations where they do switch to a lot more man coverage. During that time, they performed pretty well. 53.8% completion percentage is very respectable. Only 257 yards given up, which just comes with playing fewer snaps of man coverage than zone coverage, of course. They forced 8 incompletions to no interceptions, but they have allowed 4 touchdowns while in man coverage. In zone coverage, though, which they play about 70% of the time, the remaining 10% is kind of like miscellaneous goal line or other little things. They allow over 74, nearly 3/4 of the passes against their zone coverage to be completed. They've allowed over 730 yards, 734. Again, they play this coverage a lot more than they play man coverage, so that's more of a volume stat than anything else. Have allowed a touchdown, 4 incompletions, 3 interceptions. But the thing that I draw your eyes to, and I know 3 interceptions sounds like a lot. We're 8 games into the season. There should be more interceptions than that. But what the number that I draw your eyes to is the 75%, nearly, right? It's 74.2. We'll call it 75% of the completions that they allow to be completed. 3 times this season, the most targeted player against the Chicago Bears offense has gone for at least 75 yards. That goes from running backs to wide receivers to tight ends in some situations, like Travis Kelce and stuff like that. Chris Olave has been, out of 8 games so far, in 6 of those games, he has been the most targeted player, and he is the most targeted player on the New Orleans Saints offense so far in the passing game. Now let's look at Chris Olave's numbers against zone coverage so far this season. 31 catches, 324 yards, and a touchdown on over 60%, over a 60% reception rate. Now you might be saying, well, he was better than that last year. No, he wasn't. Through 8 games, nearly the same numbers. 27 catches, so 4 fewer. 384 yards, you got me there. 60 more receiving yards. No touchdowns, and then just a slightly better reception rate of 64.3%. And by the way, Chris Olave has seen a lot more low percentage passing attempts this season so far than he saw in 2022. And I don't mean off target throws, I just mean low percentage throws down the right sideline, perimeter offense, all those other things. So over 320 of Chris Olave's 517 yards have come in against zone coverage. And that's what the Chicago Bears play the vast majority of. And Chris Olave is not far behind where he was his rookie season. He's just had additional complications this season that are drawing a greater eye. He had that 12 receiving yard game, but he's gone over at least 40 receiving yards in each of the last 3 games, over 90, over 50, over 40. I think this week is when he gets back to over 100, crosses that century mark, and for the first time in his career, gets multiple touchdowns in a game. I think that this defense gives him the opportunity to do that. I think that with this defense playing a lot of zone coverage, it's going to give him a lot of opportunity to rack up yardage, particularly between the 20s, because that's where they're going to play the majority of their zone coverage. Chris Olave is outstanding when it comes to finding the open holes in the zone, and that's where the Saints have to come in and put him in position to do that. Have him run those routes as opposed to just, these perimeter streaks and perimeter runs down the right and left sidelines. You have to be able to allow him to do what it is that makes him great. And if the Saints can do that, then this is the bounce back game that Chris Olave needed. And by the way, when it comes to his comparisons of this year to last year, not only is he basically relatively the same this year as he was last year against zone coverage, same thing against man coverage as well. The Chris Olave that you knew and loved is not far away. It's just had a little bit of extra complication this season. And I think that he begins to shake that here this week with a big game against the Chicago Bears. Coming up next, not only does Chris Olave benefit from the way that the Chicago Bears play defense, but the New Orleans Saints offense as a whole could benefit from both the challenge and the weakness that the Chicago Bears defense will present. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most fun way to play daily fantasy sports. And if you're looking at this week's New Orleans Saints versus Chicago Bears game, you can actually go into Prize Picks and all you do is pick 2 to 6 players, choose more or less versus the projection that Prize Picks has set. You go into 25 times your money back. You can actually do up to 6 with just Alvin Kamara stats. It's super fun. So right now I've got Alvin Kamara going for less than 56.5 rushing yards, more than 33.5 receiving yards, more than just basically a half all-purpose touchdown, right? Scrimmage touchdown, so that he'll score at least one. Less on the 15 rushing attempt. I think it's going to be a Jamal Williams game this week. More on the 4.5 receptions, and then less on the 92.5 scrimmage yards. That's it. 6 of those. I'll put $20 down. I can win 500. You can too. Go and check them out today at prizepicks.com. And don't forget to try prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL with promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. And go do your own all Alvin Kamara prize picks entry. Super fun. Really happy I got to do that. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Promo code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL for that first deposit match up to $100 at PrizePicks today. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Big thank you to all you everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, later on today, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, NFL kickoff, getting you ready for the entire slate of NFL games, including some really, really fun games this weekend. And we're hoping that the New Orleans Saints and Chicago Bears game is going to be a fun game as well, especially for you, the Saints fan, because the Saints have a prime opportunity here to prove that last week wasn't just a mirage, and for it to mean something. The Chicago Bears defense presents the perfect challenge for the New Orleans Saints. Where Chicago is weak, plays right into the hands of who the New Orleans Saints want to be on offense. Where Chicago has actually been, by NFL standards, dominant so far this season, presents a good challenge for the New Orleans Saints to have to prove something. So let's take a look at this. Oh, and there's also one key stat that may change everything for the New Orleans Saints in this game. So let's take a look first at where they are weakest, right? This is the 30th ranked passing defense in terms of yardage. The Chicago Bears are. They are the 17th ranked, they are the 31st ranked pass scoring offense in the NFL by allowing 17 passing touchdowns already on the season. So nearly dead last there. They are a heavy zone run team, just like we mentioned against the or zone defense team, as we mentioned when we were talking about Chris Olave's bounce back game here. That's going to play into the hands of not only Chris Olave, but Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and others. It might make some screens ineffective, things like that, but there's enough zone beaters out there running these levels concepts, speed outs to be able to get everything flushed to one side of the field, trying to catch the weak side of the field. Like there's so many different things, Mills concepts, all this stuff that are these two-man route concepts that work really, really well against these zone coverages because you're just trying to evacuate one spot to open up the next. And so if you're able to do that, then boom, you're in a good place. So this Saints offense has what it needs schematically to be able to take advantage of the Chicago Bears defense. What you're hoping for is that the Saints didn't reintroduce a bunch of different options for each situation and that they remain sort of with that narrowed down play selection, right? Instead of having 50 plays for third and 3, 25, right? So that you've got the bangers, right? That we talked about before, the playlist idea. So you're hoping that the Saints still have that. But when it comes down to what they can do against Chicago, the scheme, schematically, everything's there in terms of being able to abuse what Chicago does on defense. The tricky part, which is a good challenge for the New Orleans Saints, is that the Chicago Bears right now are the 3rd ranked defense against the run. There's a caveat to that. So when you have a defense that's really bad against the pass, teams are going to come in wanting to pass the ball. So that's why you see a 3rd ranked defense in terms of rushing yards and a 6th, not necessarily a 6th rank, but having the 6th fewest rushing attempts against them. But the caveat to that as well is that they allow only 3.3 yards per rushing attempt. That's number 1 in the NFL. So sure, they don't allow a lot of rushing yards. Sure, they don't get run against very often, but when they do, they tend to be stout as a run defense on a per rush basis. And that run defense just got a little bit better by adding Montez Sweat at the trade deadline. Them adding Montez Sweat at the trade deadline, everybody's going to be looking at the pass rushing prowess that adds. He comes in with 6.5 sacks, which effectively doubles the entire defensive line for the Chicago Bears. But he's also an outstanding run defender as well. And he plays on the side where the Saints have been most comfortable running throughout most of the season, the Saints' right side behind Ryan Ramczyk and Cesar Ruiz. Now that has started to change a little bit. Now that they feel good about Andres Pete over on the left side, Max Garcia over on the left side, they've actually been running a lot less zone runs, a lot more gap scheme, which is basically just like, you're in front of me, my job is to block you. If I'm in front of you, your job is to block me. Like, it's that simple. We're not worried about a gap. We're not worried about anything like that. But if I can run through you and get to the second level, great. If you can run through me, get to the second level, great. Like, that's kind of the idea of a gap scheme or a man scheme run. So what the Saints have been doing is that they've been taking Cesar Ruiz, who's on the right side at guard, who is one of their better run blockers as well, and using his athleticism as a pulling guard to go around the left side. So even with Montez Sweat there over on the right side, expect the Saints to continue to run a little bit more to the left side than you have seen over the course of the season now that they feel a little bit more comfortable in the dynamics of their run game. So they can curve a little bit of the impact of Montez Sweat in the run game by simply making him the backside run defender. Now, he's athletic enough to get around the edge and be able to do that. He's not an elite athlete, but he's athletic enough to be a guy that can make a backside play. So you have to be careful with that, but still a good idea to probably run away from him a few times more than you might run to him. Doesn't mean you can't run to him at all, but good news, you can now run away from him if you felt like you needed to, if you're the New Orleans Saints. All right, here's the key stat here that I wanted to point out that I think plays right into the hand of who the New Orleans Saints want to be. The Saints did something that they should have been doing all season last week, and that is that when they got into the red zone, that the offense turned over to Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara. And you might say, well, Ross, they can't do that every week. My question to you is why? Why can't you do that every week? We watched the entire 2019 season knowing exactly where the football was going to be thrown from Drew Brees to Michael Thomas every single game, 20-something times a game. Not really. I know not 20-something times a game, but you get my idea. And no defense could stop that. The Philadelphia Eagles, they run the tush push every 4th and 1, every 3rd and 1. Everyone knows it's coming. They can't stop it. If you're better at doing something than teams are better at stopping that thing, then you keep doing that thing. And the thing that the New Orleans Saints have been better at doing, that no one has been better at stopping, is running with Taysom Hill and utilizing Alvin Kamara as a dynamic weapon inside the 20-yard line. So keep doing it. And this works out really well for the New Orleans Saints because when Chicago gets in the red zone as a defense, they are the worst defense in the NFL in allowing red zone possessions to lead to touchdowns. 78.3%. 78.3%. 78 of those possessions, red zone possessions, turn into touchdowns for opposing teams. You want to know how bad that is? New Orleans Saints defense got a little bit of flack for being, maybe the red zone defense isn't as good. 54.5%. 54.6, 54.55, so 54.6%. So on a nearly 25% basis or difference, the Chicago Bears are worse than what has been criticized about the New Orleans Saints. This is a perfect game for the New Orleans Saints to A, prove that they can run the ball against a very good run defense. B, prove that they can pass and move the ball through the air between the 20s, going up against a terrible passing defense. So you already get to lean on the strength in that way. And then, was I doing numbers or letters? C, we're just going to say. Score in the red zone again and convert red zone possessions, not to field goals, but to touchdowns. Saints can do that on the offensive side. It's going to be very, very hard for the Chicago Bears to keep up and keep pace. We got a lot more because that's where I want to go next. How the New Orleans Saints and Dennis Allen can make things very, very uncomfortable and very, very unsuccessful for the Chicago Bears offense and undrafted free agent Division II rookie quarterback, Tyson Bagent. Got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at DoorDash, my absolute favorite. I told you if you were at the live show last night that I was going to use DoorDash last night. Ordered from Thousand Figs, got a nice falafel sandwich. Took like 20 minutes to get to the spot. It was fantastic. It was awesome. Absolutely one of my favorite local spots. And I love that I get to order from them anytime that I want through DoorDash. Got them Brussies as well. I'm a big fan of Brussels sprouts. Loves me some Brussies. So I want you to be able to head over to DoorDash as well, whether you're in New Orleans, whether you're visiting New Orleans for this game, or maybe you're just a New Orleans Saints fan elsewhere. No matter where you are, there's great local spots available to you on DoorDash. So go and support your local businesses. And I'm going to help you with this here. I'm going to help you get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first DoorDash order. When you download the DoorDash app and enter the promo code LOCKED23, LOCKED23, subject to change, terms apply. Again, that is 50% off up to a $10 value. When you spend $15 or more on your first DoorDash app, just download the DoorDash app today. Enter promo code LOCKED23, subject to change, terms apply. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with why this game needs to be a Dennis Allen masterclass. No exceptions. Appreciate all you everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Appreciate you very much for being here. So the big story for the Chicago Bears is that Tyson Bagent continues to start for them while Justin Fields continues to come back from injury. And so while that's their biggest story, that means that one of the biggest things that the New Orleans Saints need to be aware of is that Tyson Bagent isn't just your regular D2 undrafted free agent rookie walking off the street and being thrust into a starting role. Now, is he all of those things? 100%. But he's a little bit different. He's a guy that has made this work and that has found success. And you have to take that seriously. What I respect very much about the New Orleans Saints defense and what I respect very much about the New Orleans Saints as a whole so far this week in particular is that they are not looking at the Chicago. Every time that they talk about the Chicago Bears, they talk about the Chicago Bears being a good team, being a tough team, being a challenging team, being they talk about Tyson Bagent as being not some rookie, but being not just being a rookie, but being a rookie that presents a lot of challenges, that is good at his craft, all these other things. And I love that perspective from New Orleans because one of the things that I mentioned during the Crossover Thursday episode, which you can find back on Thursday with myself and Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears, is that if the New Orleans Saints want to win this game, first of all, they have to not lose it, right? Like losing this game would be an absolute disaster for this team at this point. And so so first of all, they can't lose it. But secondly, they have to treat the Chicago Bears like they're an elite team. They have to, because you don't want to sleep on this team. You don't want to come in underprepared and overconfident and whatever. Like the Saints need to play their game. But they got to be ready for what Chicago is going to do as well. Like when you've got a young quarterback like this, tight ends, running backs out of the backfield, some trickery, and the number one wide receiver. Those are the things that you're looking out for. If you're the New Orleans Saints, those are the things that you're trying to take away. Demario Davis already acknowledged Cole Kmet, the Chicago Bears starting tight end. But there's also Robert Tonyan, a guy that had a lot more going for him when he was in Green Bay, but still, knocking stuff over. But still somebody that can impact this game. Mercedes Lewis, believe it or not, still playing, still there. There's still a lot of opportunity here for the Chicago Bears to do the things that keep a rookie quarterback comfortable. If you're the New Orleans Saints, you got to take all those things away. DJ Moore, Roshan Johnson, Dante Foreman, like you have to be ready for what weapons the offense does have. But you also got to be ready for the quarterback. And here's two ways to be ready for Tyson Bagent. First of all, you got to disguise. We talked about CJ Stroud when the Saints were going up against the Houston Texans earlier this season and how you're not going to show CJ Stroud a lot of stuff that he hasn't seen already, believe it or not. Like him coming from Ohio State, all that, playing at a high level the way that he did. You've got to work to still find some things that he hasn't seen before. Now, you can show him those things and you can find those things and they will work. And it actually did work to an extent, right? Zach Bond got the interception, fumbled the interception. This is a game against Tyson Bagent where you can show him a bunch of stuff he ain't seen before, or at least hasn't seen outside of the few games in the NFL that he has played thus far. And the way that the New Orleans Saints lean on versatility, rotate their players on the defensive side, and give you different looks is perfect for New Orleans as they're going up against Tyson Bagent. That's what Dennis Allen should be scheming up more of this week and living with throughout this week, like living on in this game. Because you're going to have a real opportunity to just confuse the ever-loving bejesus out of Tyson Bagent because you're going to show him things that he hasn't seen before. So that's number one, is disguise. Number two is pressure. Chicago's offensive line is not good. You got to be able to make them pay. And you got to be able to get Tyson Bagent under pressure. Bagent, when he is under pressure, has a pretty good completion percentage, actually, 61.9%, but hasn't thrown a touchdown. His yards per attempt sink down to below 5 per attempt, nearly down to 4 per attempt. His off-target throws go up. His turnover-worthy passes in terms of percentage double. And even his passer rating drops 30 points from 81.7 when kept clean to 51.7 when pressured. And he hasn't been able to help move the chain. So this is a big one on third down. Tyson Bagent has thrown for 27 first downs so far in his time. However, 22 of those have come when he's kept clean. So we're not just talking about touchdowns. We're not just talking about standard completions, things like that. We're talking about keeping his team on the field. And when the New Orleans Saints want to generate pressure, they want to generate pressure on third down. So with him only having 5 tossed first downs in his time while under pressure, out of his 27 first downs that he's thrown, it gives you a pretty clear indication that on third down, you want to send some pressure, get the offense off the field, get your offense back on the field. That becomes a big part of what the New Orleans Saints can do in this game. He places passes accurately. He throws accurately. You can boost that turnover-worthy throw percentage, like we mentioned, by getting that pressure. But one of the other things too is that when you get to him, he doesn't hold on to the football. He's a fumbler. He's a fumbler when you get to him. So get there, get the sacks, force the fumbles, and then get your offense back on the field. He's been sacked 3 times while under pressure, and he's got a couple of fumbles under his name already. He's got a couple of scrambles, things like that as well. So for Tyson Bagent, the formula is right up the alley of what it is that a New Orleans Saints defense and a Dennis Allen defense wants to do anyway. You want to confuse the quarterback. You want to get the quarterback off of his spot, and you want to take advantage of any mistakes you can force that quarterback to make, whether it's by putting the ball on the ground or by sending the ball somewhere it's not supposed to go via the air, right? Get that off-target throw. Think about the pick 6 against Mac Jones, right? Like that's effectively the highest level of what we're talking about here in Tyson Bagent is Mac Jones. And so what happened? They got pressure on Mac Jones. He rushed a pass out. It ended up getting knocked off target because he was hit while he was throwing, intercepted by Tyrann Mathieu, brought back for a touchdown. You can make that same or similar thing. Doesn't have to be a touchdown, but you can create that same type of error, that same type of mistake by simply getting pressure on Tyson Bagent and getting in his face. Doesn't mean you got to get to him in time for the sack. Certainly it helps, right? The more you hit him, the more uncomfortable he gets, the more he gets off of his spot, the more he starts seeing ghosts, and the more he starts moving off of his spot, even though pressure's not there. So you're pressuring him without pressuring him by the time you get to the 3rd or 4th quarter. But this is one of the reasons why the rotation of the New Orleans Saints defense becomes so important. Because while that offensive line in front of Tyson Bagent, they're going to play all 60 offensive snaps, 70 offensive snaps, however many offensive snaps Chicago takes, the New Orleans Saints defensive line is going to rotate. They're going to rotate. Ain't nobody on that defensive line for the New Orleans Saints going to play more than 40, 50 snaps. Everybody stays fresher going into the 4th quarter than the offensive line that's been out there every single play, run, pass, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th down, whatever it might be. They were out there. They're out there on special teams reps. They're out there for all of it. New Orleans Saints defensive line, they're going to keep rotating. And so they're going to stay a lot more fresh. So fresh and so clean. And they're going to be coming after Tyson Bagent in that way. So you get the pressure on him, show him stuff he's never seen before, give him that disguise, confuse him, make him hold on to the ball, progress through his progressions, right? You show him something pre-snap, rotate post-snap. When he comes up, he sees something different. He's got to reread the defense. He's got to process all that. He's got to go through his progressions. Cam Jordan's there. Carl Granderson's there, whomever. That's what you need to see for this New Orleans Saints defense. This one has to be a masterclass by Dennis Allen and the Saints defense. And so we've lined it all up, right? Should be a big game for Chris Olave. Should be a big game for the offense. Can be a big game. Well, let me say it this way. Can be a big game for the offense. Should be a big game for the defense. The New Orleans Saints should win this game. If they do not, it's not going to go well, right? Like, that's going to be a catastrophe for the New Orleans Saints if they can't win this game. And I'm talking close loss, blowout loss, fluke of a loss. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The Saints cannot lose this game. If they do, it's going to be really, really hard to get people back on the wagon. So I think the New Orleans Saints understand how important this game is. It's one of the reasons why they're treating it so important. No, they're treating it so seriously, right? They're treating it like it's important, which is good. And not at all an exception for how they would usually treat a game, but it's good that they're not, you don't get a sense of like, well, it's just the Chicago Bears, blah, blah, blah. It's a good thing. Now, let's see if they can make a better thing out of it. Another win to jump up to 5-4 and get back in the winning side of their record. Coming up later on today, we'll be live after practice, get you all the updates you need for game designations, as well as, any other big stories that are coming out before this weekend. I'll give you an idea of what I think the offensive line is going to look like. And then tomorrow, Saturday, so in case you missed it, all 5 of my biggest takes from the week, all in one place to help you get ready for Sunday's action. Thank you so much, as always, to all you everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. I appreciate you very, very much for making me a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.